the family that truly matters. Those 5 words popped up on my screen, a digital guillotine severing me from my own life. The photo featured my daughter-in-law Brittany, smiling her 1,000-watt smile, nestled between my son, Michael, and her mother, Sharon. Me? The woman who'd raised him, fed him, and sacrificed everything for decades? I had been erased from the family equation with the cold, swift efficiency of someone wiping a mistake off a whiteboard. My fingers, which had baked thousands of pies to fund his education, trembled over the keyboard. I typed my reply, 2 simple words that felt heavier than a tombstone. Good luck. I had no idea those words would unleash a storm that would change our lives forever. An hour later, Michael's frantic shouts echoed through my house, the same house I built from nothing. "Mom, what did you do? The lawyer just called me. The house, the properties, everything." His face was as pale as a ghost, his hands trembling as he shoved his phone in my face, littered with missed calls from the bank. At that moment, watching the panic bloom in the eyes of the boy I raised, I knew my revenge had begun. But to understand how I reached this breaking point, how a mother could orchestrately dismantle her own son's life, I need to take you back to the very beginning. My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm 63 years old, and I've worked like a draft horse my entire life to build a legacy my family simply took for granted. It all started when I was 16, pregnant, and abandoned by Michael's father on a rainy street corner in Portland, Oregon. With nothing but a family recipe for apple pie, I started selling slices to passers-by. With those first dollars, I bought more ingredients, more flour, more sugar, more hope. Year after year, dollar by dollar, I built a small empire, 3 rental properties, and a bank account that most people would envy. Everything I had, I earned through sheer grit. And everything changed the day Michael introduced me to Brittany Hayes. It was a Sunday in March, and the comforting smell of my slow-cooked beef stew filled the house. Then I heard it, the sharp, arrogant click of her high heels on my hardwood floor. That sound, like tiny daggers striking my home, warned me that this woman would bring nothing but trouble. She appeared at my door in a tight red dress that looked less like clothing and more like a second skin. Her smile was as fake as a $3 bill. "So you're the mother-in-law," she said, extending a hand as cold as ice, while her eyes scanned me from head to toe, a human price scanner calculating my worth and finding it wanting. Not, "Nice to meet you," not, "Pleased to finally meet you." She just labeled me, the mother-in-law, like I was another piece of furniture in the house she already planned to redecorate. Her long, perfect blood-red nails stood in stark contrast to my calloused, scarred hands that told the story of every sacrifice I'd ever made for my son. Michael, blinded by a love so complete it bordered on stupidity, didn't notice the venom dripping from her every word. My son, my pride, the man I raised alone after his father took off when he was 8, was utterly hypnotized by a woman who showed her contempt for me before she'd even stepped over the threshold. But I chose to stay quiet. I chose to watch, never imagining I was welcoming a viper into my home, a viper that would later try to swallow me whole. That first dinner, Brittany turned my dining table into a silent battlefield. "What an interesting decorating style," she remarked, her eyes sweeping over my family photos with a look of disdain. Her gaze lingered on the picture of me graduating as an accounting technician, the only formal education I could afford while raising Michael. "This stew has such a bold flavor," she added, pushing her plate away as if it were poison. Each comment was a slap wrapped in a thin veil of fake politeness, but I swallowed my pride, smiled, and thought that perhaps, with time, she would soften. As I served dessert, I overheard her whisper to Michael, "Honey, does she always cook so homey?" Back at Mom's, we have a chef who makes more refined dishes. Her words were knives, stabbing at the very heart of who I was. This woman didn't just dislike my cooking. She was comparing my modest, love-filled home to the sterile, ostentatious lifestyle of her wealthy family. Sharon, her mother, owned a chain of upscale salons and lived in a 2-story mansion in the fanciest part of town. After they left, I sat alone, clearing the plates Brittany had barely touched. The silence in my house felt heavy, loaded with dark omens. Michael was too caught up in his girlfriend's fake smiles to notice how she treated me. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one where I'd sat countless nights sewing his school uniforms to afford his education, and for the first time in years, tears rolled down my wrinkled cheeks. But I was a survivor of poverty, abandonment, and loneliness. I wasn't about to let some spoiled princess make me feel worthless in my own home. Little did I know that first humiliation was just the opening act of a 5-year nightmare that would lead to the most radical decision of my life. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how it all unfolds, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment below, and subscribe to Aunt Millie's Tales so you don't miss what happens next. The months that followed were a masterclass in slow psychological torture, all disguised as family visits. Brittany had mastered the art of humiliating me with a smile. Every Sunday lunch became an opportunity for her to land another venomous remark. She played the perfect doting daughter-in-law in front of Michael, but the moment he left the room, she transformed into a viper. "Oh, dear Eleanor, still using that cheap face cream? Look at those wrinkles," she'd say, applying her fancy imported serum in my bathroom mirror, her reflection smirking at mine. Her words were daggers wrapped in velvet, delivered in that sweet, syrupy voice she used to manipulate my son. I gritted my teeth and kept serving the food, swallowing my pride like bitter medicine. Things escalated when they announced their engagement. Michael showed up one afternoon, his eyes sparkling with joy, holding a bottle of champagne and bubbling with talk of wedding plans. "Mom, I want you to be the first to know. Brittany and I are getting married in December," he said, hugging me with a strength that reminded me of the little boy he once was. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces, but I smiled and congratulated him, because that's what mothers do. We swallow our own pain to see our children happy. Brittany, of course, had other plans for me. In the weeks that followed, she started visiting alone, supposedly to plan the wedding together and bond. The reality was far different. She would sit in my living room like she owned the place, her legs crossed, that fake smile plastered on her face as she laid out the new family rules. "Look, dear Eleanor, I know you've been alone with Michael all these years, but things are going to change now," she said one Tuesday afternoon, sipping tea from my best china. Her nails tapped against the porcelain in a hypnotic, threatening rhythm. A married woman needs her space, her privacy. There can't be a third wheel interfering in the marriage. The way she spat out the words, "third wheel," made my blood run cold. I tried to explain that I had never meddled in Michael's relationships, that I had always respected his privacy and his choices, but Brittany had it all figured out. Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong on purpose, it's just, well, men can be so attached to their mothers, can't they? And that can cause issues in a marriage. Her words were like acid, corrosive and precise. During the wedding planning, Brittany made sure I felt like a complete outsider. When we went dress shopping, she parked me in a corner while she and her mother, Sharon, made all the decisions. "This is really a mother-daughter tradition," Sharon said with a condescending smile. "I'm sure you understand." I sat there quietly, watching my son's future mother-in-law take the place that should have been mine. The biggest humiliation came when they went to tour the wedding venue. Michael had invited me, but when we arrived, Brittany feigned surprise. "Oh, honey, I didn't know you invited your mom." We'd agreed it'd just be the three of us, she said, gesturing to herself and Sharon. But she can come along, of course. Though she won't have a say, since we've already decided on everything. I became a silent spectator at my own son's wedding planning. On the wedding day itself, Brittany ensured I appeared in as few photos as possible. Every time the photographer approached our group, she'd find an excuse to shoo me away. Dear Eleanor, could you please check if the guests have enough water? The details are so important. I obeyed like a hired hand, while Sharon took my place in all the key family photos, beaming beside my son. After the honeymoon, the happy couple moved into an apartment I had helped finance. Michael had come to me, his voice thick with embarrassment, explaining that his salary from his tech job wasn't enough for the down payment. Mom, you know I'll pay back every single cent. I just need a loan of $20,000, he'd pleaded. How could I say no to helping my only son start his new life? But visits to their new home turned into weekly torture sessions. Brittany had decorated the apartment in a sleek, modern style that clashed with my more traditional tastes. Careful sitting on that couch, dear Eleanor. It's imported from Italy and quite delicate. We wouldn't want it stained or broken, she'd say every time I visited, treating me like a clumsy intruder in the home I had helped pay for. During family dinners, Brittany perfected the art of making me invisible. She'd talk only to Michael, discussing fancy restaurants they went to, artsy films they'd seen, and lavish trips they planned, all things she knew I had no knowledge of. When I tried to join the conversation, she'd look at me with a pitying expression. Oh, yes, Eleanor, but you wouldn't know that place. It's pretty exclusive. Her words were subtle slaps, little digs that Michael, in his blissful ignorance, never seemed to notice. The final straw, the one that broke the camel's back and set me on the path to ruin them, came when Brittany started influencing Michael's financial decisions. One day, he showed up at my house with a proposal that chilled me to the bone. Mom, Brittany and I have been thinking. You're getting older, and we need to think about financial security for the future. What if you put the properties in my name? That way, if anything ever happens to you, there won't be any legal issues or probate. It was Michael's voice, but those were Brittany's words, her cold, calculating ambition wrapped in the guise of filial concern. That night, alone in my house, surrounded by the memories of a boy I no longer recognized, I realized I had raised a stranger. The boy who once cried when I cut my finger was now asking me to hand over everything I had built through decades of blood, sweat, and tears. But a mother's love is a blind, deaf, and foolish thing. Against all logic, against every screaming instinct in my body, I signed the papers he put in front of me, trusting that my son would never truly hurt me. That day, I dug my own grave. It would just take me a few more months to realize the depth of my mistake. Brittany's words, overheard by chance, cut into my heart like shards of glass. My daughter-in-law was plotting to use a future grandchild as an excuse to kick me out of my own home for good. Her cold, calculated cruelty terrified me, but it also ignited something else inside me. A steely, unbending determination. If she could plan my destruction with such ruthless precision, then I could plan my defense with equal resolve. That very night, hiding in the bathroom of my own house, I made a call. Elias, I whispered into my cell phone, we need to speed things up. This situation is becoming unbearable. My lawyer, Elias Thorne, had been quietly reviewing the transfer documents I'd signed, searching for any legal flaw, any loophole that could save me. Eleanor, I have good news, Elias replied, his voice brimming with a hope I hadn't felt in years. We found several major irregularities in the contracts. First, there was no proper cooling-off period, which is mandatory for transfers of this size. Second, the restrictive clauses weren't clearly explained to you. And third, We have ample evidence that you signed under significant emotional duress from family pressure. My heart pounded in my chest. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of light at the end of a very dark tunnel. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Keep documenting everything," Elias instructed. "Every insult, every humiliation, every sign that they are forcing you to live in degrading conditions on your own property. If possible, and if it's legal in your state, record your conversations." Over the next few days, I transformed from a victim into a detective. I bought a small, powerful digital recorder that I could hide in my apron pocket and began capturing Brittany's most incriminating conversations. The first recording was gut-wrenching. Brittany was on the phone with her mother, Sharon, plotting how they would remodel my house, their new house, once they finally got rid of me. "Mom, I've got it all figured out," Brittany said, her voice cold and metallic. "When I'm pregnant, we'll tell the old lady the baby needs peace and quiet, and her presence is just too stressful. If she refuses, we'll remind her she has no legal rights to the house anymore. And if she keeps pushing, we'll threaten a restraining order for family harassment." Sharon's response was even worse. "Perfect, sweetheart. I already talked to the architect. We can knock down her bedroom wall to build that walk-in closet you've always wanted and turn her bathroom into an office for Michael. This house will be stunning without all her outdated furniture." That recording was my most valuable treasure, the undeniable proof that Brittany had planned my downfall from the very beginning. But I needed more. More evidence of the systematic manipulation she wielded over Michael and me. For weeks, I gathered material like an investigative journalist. One afternoon, while Brittany was taking a long shower, I noticed her phone, left carelessly on the kitchen table. My hands shook, but I picked it up. What I found took my breath away. She had a text thread with a friend, detailing her entire strategy for dealing with the clingy mother-in-law. The messages were chilling in their calculated cruelty. "Girl, I swear this old woman drives me nuts, but I'm almost done with this mission," Brittany had written. "Michael is completely on my side now. I've convinced him his mom is toxic and controlling. Next step is the pregnancy. Once I'm expecting, I'll say I need peace and quiet, and she's got to go for the baby's sake. It's the perfect plan." I felt a surge of rage and adrenaline as I snapped photos of the texts with my own phone. Each message was a confession of guilt, proof that everything had been premeditated. Brittany wasn't just selfish. She was a master manipulator who had studied my son, found his weaknesses, and exploited them to ruin my relationship with him and steal my legacy. The most devastating piece of evidence, however, came by complete chance one Sunday afternoon. Michael had stepped out to grab something for dinner, and Brittany, thinking I was napping in my room, took a call in the living room. She was unaware that I was listening from the kitchen, my little recorder capturing every word. "Yeah, Grandma, it's almost all sorted," Brittany said in that sugary voice she reserved for family. "Michael is like putty in my hands. He does whatever I say. I got the house in his name, but he doesn't know that when we divorce, I'll get half of everything. Old Lady Eleanor worked her whole life to build this estate, and now it's going to be mine." Her next words froze my blood. "No, Grandma, I never plan to stay with Michael forever. He's spineless, no ambition, but he was the perfect vehicle for getting what I wanted. Once everything is legally locked in, I'll divorce him, take my half, and finally marry someone on my level." That confession was the moment I decided it was time for total scorched earth revenge. Brittany hadn't just humiliated me and stolen my home. She was planning to destroy my son after using him to take everything I had ever built. The war had officially begun, and she had no idea I'd been preparing for this battle for months. That night, while everyone slept, I sat in my favorite armchair and planned every single detail of my counterattack. I had recordings, photos, bank documents, and witnesses. I had a brilliant lawyer who had found the legal irregularities we needed. And most importantly, I had the iron will of a woman who had already lost everything, and therefore had nothing left to lose. My revenge would unfold in 3 perfectly coordinated phases, starting with the social media post Brittany made. But before we get to that pivotal moment, let me tell you about the final months of preparation, the months when I became a silent strategist, amassing the legal weapons for the ultimate battle. Through October and November, Brittany ramped up her psychological attacks. She no longer bothered hiding her contempt, especially when Michael wasn't around. One Tuesday morning, as I was washing the breakfast dishes she had deliberately left dirty, she sauntered into the kitchen with that venomous smile I knew all too well. "Dear Eleanor, I've got a proposal you'll just love," she said, leaning against the kitchen table as if she owned it. "Mom knows this gorgeous retirement home with gardens and activities for people your age. Don't you think you'd be happier there, surrounded by folks who share your interests?" The way she said "people your age" felt like a death sentence. I responded with a calm I had learned to maintain through months of torment. "Brittany, this is my home. It holds my memories, my history, my entire life. I'm not going anywhere." But she was ready, as always, with a comeback. "Oh, dear Eleanor, you don't seem to get it. This isn't your house anymore. Legally, it belongs to Michael, and Michael is my husband, so I am the lady of the house now." Her words were a slap, but they also fueled my resolve to speed up my plan. That afternoon, I met Elias at his office to review everything we had collected. My lawyer had been working tirelessly for months and finally had game-changing news. "Eleanor, we found the definitive evidence," he said, a triumphant smile on his face. "The documents you signed have irregularities so serious that any judge would declare them null and void. Plus, your recordings clearly prove you were a victim of family manipulation and psychological abuse." My heart raced as I flipped through the thick dossier he had prepared. "But that's not all," Elias continued. "We've also discovered that Brittany has been using the properties as collateral for personal loans without your knowledge. She's racked up debts of over $50,000, all tied to properties that, legally, still belong to you." My hands trembled as I grasped the sheer scale of the scam. The plan was simple but devastating. We would file a lawsuit for contract nullification, breach of trust, psychological manipulation, and fraudulent use of assets. Timing, however, was critical. "We need a public trigger," Elias explained. "Something that undeniably shows Brittany's cruelty and contempt toward you. Evidence so clear that no one could possibly defend her behavior." That trigger came on Friday, December 13th, a day that will be etched in my memory forever. I was in the kitchen, making lunch, when I heard Brittany's laughter echoing from the living room. She was with her mother, Sharon, and 2 of her friends, all of them giggling over something on her phone. "What a gorgeous photo!" one of her friends exclaimed. "You guys look like the perfect family." Curiosity drew me closer, and what I saw broke my heart into 1,000 pieces, but also sparked the righteous fury I had been holding back for months. Brittany had posted a photo of herself, Michael and Sharon all smiling happily in my own living room, with the caption that changed everything: "The family that really matters." The message was clear and unbelievably cruel. I, who had raised Michael alone for over 2 decades, who had sacrificed my youth and my dreams to give him a decent life, had been officially erased from the family Brittany valued. The photo was deliberately taken to exclude me, and the caption was a public declaration that I no longer mattered. My friends from the neighborhood called immediately. "Eleanor, did you see what your daughter-in-law posted?" asked Nancy, my lifelong neighbor. "How could she be so cruel?" Others saw the post too, and supportive comments from me began to pour in. But I knew this was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. With trembling hands, I typed my response on my phone, just 2 words that would change everything forever. Good luck. The second I hit send, I knew I had detonated a nuclear bomb that would shatter the perfect life Brittany thought she had built on my ruins. Right after, I called Elias. "It's time," I said, my voice steady. "Execute the plan." It just happened. Exactly what we needed. My lawyer had been waiting for this call for weeks. Perfect, Eleanor. Within the hour, all the legal documents will be in motion. The property transfers will be voided, the bank accounts frozen, and we will begin the immediate recovery of all your assets. As Elias set the legal machine in motion, I braced myself for what was coming. I knew that within hours Michael would start receiving calls that would upend his entire world. The bank, the lawyer who handled the original transfer, the financial authorities, they would all inform him simultaneously that he no longer owned anything, that everything had reverted to its original state. During that hour of waiting, Brittany and her friends kept laughing, completely oblivious to the imminent collapse of her world. "Look how I put all the nosy people in their place," she said, reading the comments on her post. "It's about time everyone knew who's in charge of this family now." Her words stabbed my heart, but they also fueled my thirst for justice. At 2 p.m. sharp, Michael's phone started ringing. It was the bank, informing him that the accounts tied to the properties had been frozen by court order. 10 minutes later, another call, this time from the lawyer who had handled the original transfer, explaining that there were serious legal irregularities in the documents he had signed. From the kitchen, I could hear Michael's voice cracking with each successive call. "What do you mean the accounts are frozen? What does void contracts mean? What irregularities?" Brittany stopped laughing, her face now a mask of growing terror. The third call sealed the deal. It was Elias, officially notifying Michael that a lawsuit had been filed to nullify the property transfers entirely, and until the case was resolved, all assets would automatically revert to their original owner. "Mr. Vance," Elias said firmly, "your mother has the legal right to immediately reclaim everything that belongs to her." When Michael hung up, his face was ghostly pale, his hands shaking as he looked to Brittany for answers she couldn't possibly give. "What is going on?" he shouted at his wife. "Why is the lawyer saying Mom can take everything back? What did we do wrong?" Brittany was in shock, unable to process that her perfect plan had crumbled into dust in a matter of minutes. And that's when Michael stormed through the house, yelling my name in desperation. "Mom! What did you do?" "The lawyer just called about the house, the properties, everything." His voice was a raw mix of panic, confusion, and fear. At that moment, I knew my revenge had officially begun, and nothing in that house, now mine again, would ever be the same. "Mom, please, just tell me what's happening," Michael pleaded, tears welling in his eyes. He knelt by my armchair, just as he did when he was a little boy and had broken something valuable. But this time, what was broken was far more than a vase or a plate. It was trust. It was respect. It was the family I had built with so much love and had allowed them to destroy. I looked at him with a calm that only years of suffering and the certainty of doing the right thing can bring. "Son, sit down. It's time you knew the whole truth," I said, pointing to the couch where we had watched movies and talked for hours when he was little. Brittany tried to approach, but I stopped her with a look that brooked no argument. "You sit too, Brittany. This concerns you most of all." I pulled a thick folder from the bag at my feet, a dossier I had been compiling for months. It held photos, transcribed recordings, bank documents, and a detailed timeline of every humiliation I had endured over the past 5 years. "Michael, I want you to see this," I said, handing him the first photo. It was a screenshot of the text message where Brittany told her friend she would use a pregnancy as an excuse to kick me out of the house. Michael's face crumpled as he read it, his eyes darting across the text. With each line, his expression grew more horrified. "Brittany, what is this? he asked his wife, his voice trembling. She sat in silence, her face paler than the living room walls. That's nothing compared to this, I said, handing him the transcript of the recording where Brittany confessed she planned to divorce him as soon as she had secured half of everything. Read it out loud, Michael. I want you to hear the words of the woman you claim to love, in your own voice. My son started reading, his voice breaking. Michael's like putty in my hands. He does whatever I say. I never planned to stay with him forever. Once everything's legally locked in, I'll divorce him, take my half, and marry someone on my level. Each word was a hammer blow, shattering the idyllic image he had of his wife. Brittany tried to defend herself with the same emotional manipulation she had used for years. Honey, that's not true. I never said those things. Your mom is making it all up to tear us apart. Can't you see she's just jealous of our love? But her words sounded hollow and desperate, like the last gasps of a cornered animal. I simply pulled out my phone and played the original recording. Brittany's crystal-clear voice filled the room. Michael's like putty in my hands. He does whatever I say. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stared at his wife as if she were a complete stranger, as if he had just realized he'd been living with someone he didn't know at all. There's more, I continued relentlessly. I showed him the bank documents, revealing how Brittany had used my properties as collateral for personal loans. Your wife has been racking up debts to fund her lavish lifestyle, Michael. She owes over $50,000, and she was planning to pay it off by selling my house. The numbers were cold, hard facts, as undeniable as steel. Michael stood and walked to the window, turning his back on Brittany. His shoulders shook with silent sobs. How could I have been so blind? He murmured against the glass. How could I have let her treat you like this, Mom? How could I have been so stupid? His pain was real, but it came far too late. I wasn't done. The final blow would be the most devastating. I pulled out the latest recording, the one where Brittany was on the phone with her mother, Sharon, planning to turn my bedroom into a walk-in closet once they had kicked me out. Listen to this, son. Hear how they plan to erase every last trace of me from this house. When the recording ended, Brittany finally spoke, but not with her usual manipulative tone. Now, she screamed like a wounded animal. Fine. Yes, it's all true. But you brought this on yourself, you meddling old woman. Always in the way, always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Michael needed a wife, not a controlling second mother. Her words confirmed everything I already knew, but hearing them out loud, without the masks or pretense, was liberating. Thank you for your honesty, Brittany, I replied, with a calm that infuriated her even more. Now Michael can see exactly who you really are. She exploded. I don't care what he thinks. I deserve better than this outdated house and this mediocre family. Michael is a spineless loser, and you're a bitter old hag who doesn't know when to quit. Her mask had fallen completely, revealing the venomous snake she had always been. Michael turned slowly toward his wife, and for the first time in years, I saw in his eyes the determination he had inherited from me. Brittany, I want you out of this house, right now. I never want to see you again. His voice was firm, free of the weakness he had shown for so long. You're kicking me out? Brittany screamed, incredulous. This is my house. I'm your wife. You can't do this. But Michael had made his final decision. This was never your house. This is my mother's house. The woman who sacrificed everything for me, while you only planned to destroy me. Get out, now, before I call the police.